551 Open Meetings of the Texas Government Code is amended. I call to order a meeting of the Board of Trustees of the Austin Independent School District for Monday, May 13, 2013 at 6:30 p.m. The board may meet in closed session to deliberate the appointment, employment evaluation, reassignment duties, discipline, or dismissal of a public officer or employee, deliberation of the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property, deliberation of a negotiated contract for a prospective gift to the district, deliberation about commercial or financial information that the board has received from a business prospect, or deliberation of the offer of a financial or other incentive to a business prospect, and or to consult with legal counsel regarding pending or contemplated litigation or a settlement offer or a matter on which the school board district's legal counsel determines should be confidential, including consideration of contract-related matters associated with the selection of a partnering entity for Eastside Memorial High School in accordance with Chapter 551 of the Texas Government Code, Sections 551.074, 551.072, 551.073, 551.087, and 551.071, respectively. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Hinojosa. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion passes by all of those present at the dais. Okay, would you like to lead us in the pledge?
Be happy to. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Okay, the board will now move to closed session. Thank you, board members. We have sufficient trustees to reconvene at 7:53. The first item on the agenda is options for the use of the Allen facility for the 2013-14 year and discussion of regarding the Allen facility in 2014 and 15.
Yes.
Dr. Sharpen.
Sure. Mr. President, trustees, agenda, there it is. You've scheduled to have a discussion regarding the Allen facility. In your last guidance to the administration in February, you asked us to explore other options for the next school year in generally the broad categories that were outlined in your agenda item, like what might be other revenue-generating options for the building, what might it mean if we looked at expanding pre-K, what might it mean if we did another pre-K 8 using elementary and a middle school model to enhance and strengthen the Eastside Memorial vertical team as it's been outlined in some of our work that we've been talking about over the last few months. So we did look at some of these things, and listed in your agenda, if you flip the page from 2 to 3, at the top, we just started collecting your ideas and summarizing them as we got basically to today's date. And then if you look at the administrative considerations, basically what we tried to do was outline for you what you might want to think about as we look at the use of the building. So none of the estimates are hard. We just tried to do guesstimates really so that we could at least initiate the conversation and kickstart your thoughts about the facility use for 14-15, but 13-14, as you can see under 1, was from the board's guidance really focused on just either leasing or using the space for AISD where we could do some cost avoidance, and then thinking about other things for the use of the space over time and in the future. So the first one about leasing, we've already shared with the board that in order to lease, we'd have to go out to bid, and we would not. I've shared with y'all that timeline before, and I won't do it again tonight. But basically, it could yield about $240,000 in rent. But it would make it very difficult if you leased the site for a year and gave it a 1-year lease to be able to get someone out and get the building ready if we were doing another school program in it for the 14-15 school year. Number 2 was about using it for AISD, where we have some departments that are in leased space, and those leases are ending. So we would not be operating a school program, but instead using it for some combination, perhaps, or one of the following: system-wide testing, information services, or system-wide testing and information services to be able to get those cost savings so that we don't have to be in a lease. And we think that that would save us up to about $619,000 per year if we utilize that option. And then if you just, we started on page 4, number 3, A through E, with an A not operating anything at all. And if we did that, it would allow the district to reduce the operating budget for fiscal year 14 by about $3.5 million. And that represents a combination of staffing and supplies and any other related cost. And it would just help us reduce our overall shortfall. If the building is empty-ish and we aren't using it for a school program, but for other things, like the programs I told you about under number 2, we would have more nominal costs like electricity, water, custodial, some security patrols, but that's far less than us trying to find dollars to open up a comprehensive school. And then we just started going through the different ideas that people mentioned. So Depending on what happened with the bond, we might have needed to relocate ALC, and if so, that might have been an option. People talked about a pre-K center. As we know, though, pre-K centers or pre-K costs are funded wholly by the district for something like this, and we would be facing all of the startup costs, which is very similar to starting a school, and that's about $1.4 million. And then there was some talk about, again, we're still in school mode, a dual language program, middle school, and I was with some community members last week, and they were saying, you know, used to be a middle school, maybe we consider it as a middle school again. But either way, the one-time cost when you start getting into elementary and middle school grades starts topping over $6 million. And of course, that depends on how you're growing it, but that could, that's when you have a full comprehensive program. And then depend again on what based on the outcome of the bond election, you could use the site for the School for Young Men, eliminating the need to relocate the ALC, and but it would have some renovation costs to make it into a 6 through 12. And then again, depending on the bond, Career and Technical Education Center was another one. And again, depending on how it's designed and what it's for, you still would have to do renovations to the building, but we'd have to look at our bond commitments. But we did identify, we were not able to identify any M&O dollars to be able to do this option, so you'd have to find this funding. And then we really do think it would take at least $2.46 million to launch it in its first year. I know that, you know, other people still have ideas, depending on what you want to do for 14-15, but these were all the things we pulled together based on your earlier conversations, and they're before you for your consideration and guidance tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Sarfin.
Can I say one more thing?
Sure.
I'm sorry. And then you have attachments, so we put on page 6, Exhibit A is to show you the floor plan of the building. And then Exhibit B is just some general information about the building. Exhibit C is your facility planning policy, CT local.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Sellens.
Thank you. Would like to actually throw out another option. So, Dr. Karstafen, I'm wondering if you would consider looking into the possibility of using the facility for the targeted instruction of dyslexic learners. You mentioned possibly leasing it to a dyslexic center next year, but I'm just wondering if I'm sorry I didn't get this to you before, so y'all could do the research to look at the model, but if y'all might look at some different models to see if that kind of institution would be helpful for this area and this vertical team to strengthen the progress that can be made there. Do you need, I can send you a bunch of data on it too. If
Right,
you,
and just to be clear, what you're proposing is not leasing to someone else, but actually starting our own.
correct, in 2014-15.
Okay. Ms. Tice.
Would it be totally out of the realm of possibility to open it 2013, 2014 as a regular, as an elementary school like it was before, in the hopes perhaps of retaining some of the kids who are currently attending IDEA?
Mr. President, Trustee Board Trustee Taish, sorry, I've got that other pronunciation in my name now after the Latino Awards event, so got to get that out of my mind. But you know, it was the way that the school program is designed in the first place. You know, you don't have a full articulation of grades over there right now, so you have early grades and then a 6th grade. I did meet with the community, and everything's a blur. I think that was last week. You know, to hear what they might consider. We've done those numbers. I mean, you still remember you still have to run of some part of a full program, a staff, And so whatever we do, knowing that some families will go, that will be a loss to the district in real dollars. And then from that, you would have less students to be able to run the school out of the box. So I think the question is more of, for AISD, we don't have the money to do a startup on the funding. We just, whenever we open a school, that's what we plan to do, and we don't have startup dollars for any of these. So you could open the school and tell us to add to the $42 million shortfall, and that's a decision for the board. But you could do it and see what happens. I did ask about, was asking to survey again, and we're working on that. But my read was at most, it would be like 50% at most, and of the current student population that's there today, that we'd be able to, that would stay. I don't, and then it looked like, they've made commitments, and they've signed on and made their applications to the new program.
Just to follow. Just want to make sure that whatever we do decide to do is something that the community would embrace. And so that's why I'm asking that question and wondering if the community has expressed a desire to have an elementary school as it was before, under the purview of AISD there, and would that be feasible? You're talking about startup costs to go back to the regular elementary program that was there, and you're saying that we don't have the money to do that at this point, to install was it a K through 5 program that was there?
Right, so we
Okay.
know, yeah, so that we know that, with our enrollment and our patterns, that our elementary numbers are, while on the whole, the district is growing, but the elementary numbers are lower. So you already will have that, plus the loss for whoever leaves with the new charter, and then, so you're not generating the dollars you need to be able to launch a new school. You don't have new kids coming in, and we don't get funded already for new growth, but it's even harder when you don't have the growth to be able to fill the school. You would still be either bringing kids in or taking kids away from Go Valley and Ortega again, which would make them under-enrolled again.
I'm sorry, please continue.
Did you get a sense from the community when you spoke to them about what they would feel like if it were closed, if the school were closed for 2013, 2014?
Well, I don't think that we've done enough, engagement with the whole community, but, I think people want to, if it's a school, most people want it to, to stay a school. And if it's not a school, they want to generally see it still be part of our school community and services. So Baker is an example of a school that used to be a school, but still is utilized every day for educational purposes. And that's where, I think it's always the preference to have a school go back and be a school, and then keep it within the family of the system's educational services. And then after that, I think it's far less appealing to, lease or even sell. People, by and large, like to see our schools. And given that Proposition 2 did not pass, and you have areas that are over-enrolled, I think a little bit, you'll know more about that because you're in North Central, but there could be some strategy, of course, not ready for next school year. I don't think it's ready for next school year. But there could be a strategy if we could poll the interest of those families, those conversations about a K-8 dual language or a program that allows for something that would draw families from those over-enrolled areas, or the continuation of a program from an over-enrolled school. That's just like, instead of that if that's Site A, this becomes Site B. But I think with Proposition 2, you're going to want to have some options to help relieve overcrowding. And in North Central, you know, we were doing things like moving kids to Riley, putting them on the Adobe and websites, so we didn't have to buy new land or try to construct something. So I think you may want to consider this, which was not something we were thinking about at the time, even perhaps for an over-enrollment strategy to relieve some over-enrolled schools. But I think people would prefer it to be a school. If they had a choice, it's nice to leave it a school.
Okay. Ms. Moya.
Well, I did have something to offer, but the superintendent spoke to it already I was going to ask about a strategy to deal with the over-enrollment since Proposition 2 failed. And that was my contribution to this part of the conversation was, could we, use that as a strategy or build it into our strategy for dealing with over-enrollment? Because like you said, bringing it back to an elementary school for that particular geographic area would just bring our enrollment down in other schools, which would put them back as being under-enrolled, which is not what we want to do. And so, to find another way, I agree with that we should keep it in an academic program of some sort. But I'd like to see us really investigate how we can maximize the use of that building to relieve the overcrowding. Thanks.
So I would like to see that remain a school, and so whatever we do for this next year, so long as it doesn't preclude that opportunity, that would be my primary aim. So along those lines, I'm interested in whether or not there's a recommendation for how we might be able to utilize it for 1 year only. I know you have different considerations here, but I'm not sure whether there's something that the administration sees as a best option. I think within that year period, if we can replicate, now that we have more time to do this, the process that was used for finding a partner for Eastside Memorial, where we engage parents and teachers and administrators in that vertical team, and open it up to the community at large, and talk about maybe on a monthly basis meeting, what would you like to see in this campus, and see where that dovetails with the best thinking of the administration. I think that needs to be what we're doing for a long-term plan for this campus. So I'm not, but to Trustee Tice's point, I'm not sure that I have total clarity about what she was asking, keeping it as a school, as with the kids that are there now, the ones who will stay for the next year. Has the administration considered the cost of doing that versus the cost of losing kids from AISD schools to go to charter schools, and whether it might pay off as an investment just to buy some time and continue running that school for the next year as an elementary school?
Yes, we have. We started, let me see. To your first question, I'm going to start with the first one about what could we do that would not preclude the site from being used as a school for school year 14-15. So that's where I think you want to be very thoughtful about getting tied up in a lease, or getting someone in the building, and then you have to take time to undo what they did and kind of get the building, the facility back to being a building for schools again. So if you go to page 3 and number 2, this is where, it's, we have a lot of cost avoidance here in using it for centralized spaces. And with the adults, it's a lot easier. We don't have to meet academic standards for programming and things of that sort. So we can set things up kind of softly and temporarily. But, when we move stuff, and if you get out of that lease and we don't lease for that again, it's not like we can we can, but then where do you put those people once you've let go of those other leases? So, but this is kind of one of the better designs. If you want to have something in the building, if you wanted to be super prudent, you could do I'm on page 4, 3A, where you're not operating. You get the savings, but of course that's taking it off the bottom line. It's not like it's generating money, but at least you're not spending money, and you can plan for what you really want to do for 14, 15. I mean, that's another piece. The reason we right now we have what's the name of the library services? What's it called?
Media service.
The media services are in that building right now.
That's right.
That's our AISD department. So, and that's the yellow, right, on the map, if you look on page 6. So using the building for other AISD services, maybe, and this is a little bit to Ms. Teich, maybe we could try to focus on, we know it won't be a big school design, but you could try to have something smaller and then use the space, but still you're talking about, having to front load the money because we won't have it in the budget.
So aside from 3A, do you not see an alternative that would allow us to be able to use the building for a year and then use it the following school year as a school?
Yeah, it was this one.
So any of the number 2 options?
ABC, it's going to be some mix of that.
Okay.
Yeah, it would be some mix of that. So at least you'd be using it for something good. And Turner, feel free to jump in if there was something you wanted to add. You don't have to if you're having fun there. But this was our best. This is our best thing. At least this is something we control. It's our departments. But moving them and then moving them out again, it's just lost costs and all that moving. It's and then then you got to just put them back in a lease.
Right. Yeah, it's a hard business case to make if we're moving and then having to renovate to set them up in there if we're not planning to do that over a period of time, because we can't really recoup the cost of, recoup through the cost avoidance, the cost it'll take to renovate the building. It'll be substantial to put info services in there, for example, because there's a lot of renovation that we would have to do. So really the second option would be really more of a more permanent application for the building to use it in lieu of lease space in order to avoid the cost of that. If the end game is to keep it in use as a school, then that's probably not a good option. No.
Okay. Then we're just looking at 3A really as our only option that we can think of now if we want to use it the following year as a school.
Some iteration of that.
Some
yeah.
iteration of 3. Okay.
Of 3, the various possibilities in 3.
And, I'm sorry, there's other. So, and what do startup costs entail?
For us, the biggest cost is staff. You got to hire all the staff for, on the front end, and whether the kids come or not, we have to pay them, they're in the system. And then, as y'all know, in the October timeframe, we do some staff leveling, and then we'll move some staff around. But you have to, that's really, we're all people, and so it's like and let's say it's dual language, or let's say it's fine arts or something. It's whatever is also the cost of that program that you're putting there. We're doing your center. That's going to have a very specialized program supply design piece, I'm sure, for what that might be, and that would look very different to a school for the fine arts.
Right. And could you speak to that point about whether you all have thought through 50%? If we can keep those idea kids there, does that pay off in the long term to operate a school for you?
Well, so what we've been trying to sort out is how many people have said they would go back to their home school. And many of them, left their home school because they wanted a different opportunity option, felt like they would get something better for their child in this program versus their home school. So we have some. It was a pretty low number. I think it was like 40. I hate to do it off the top of my head, but I think it was like 47. I sent it to y'all. I don't know if y'all remember, but a small population is going back. Many, overwhelmingly, were going with IDEA, and then we had some that just hadn't indicated anything. So I was, when I talked to them, I talked to them again about some of the things that they would be potentially interested in. And if the board is, but I didn't want to commit to anything until I had my meeting tonight. But if the board is interested in trying to keep, because my guidance was we weren't using it as a school for next year, so I didn't go past that. But if this is something that I can bring back to them as something the board really does want to do, then I would need your support to do that. But at this time, our conversation had been pretty clear that we weren't using it for a school next year. So, and then we've sat down with the CFO who's run these numbers, and if you look at the 3.5 million, I mean that's basically. I mean, that's the value of the size of a school that was that size, and I think if you were gonna still offer it to those families, you're gonna still have to think in terms of pre-K 8, and if you were doing a pre-K 8, do you want another comprehensive school, or do you want to shift the design to something else that's and have a conversation with the larger community about what that might be. So I did not present that as an option. I just said that y'all had discussed it and we'd be discussing it again.
So, I'm sorry, I'm probably not asking this clearly. I really appreciate that feedback, though. But in terms of just money, in terms of what it would cost to start up a school, I guess it's the 3.5 million versus what we think we're going to lose if we don't, in terms of kids leaving AISD. We kind of worked out that math, whether it makes economic sense.
We're still, if kids walk out, and there will be some,
Right.
we will be on the losing end of that design. So, it's just how, and like I said, for the ones that were saying they were staying, they were going back to their home schools. The group that was didn't identify, we don't know. And so I'm doing outreach to them specifically.
And how many
All the
kids?
others,
That's-
what was the number? It was like 400 and something students, families identified that they were going with the charter school. How many? 398.
And how many were going back to their? I'm
About
sorry, I didn't-
40, it was about 48, yeah.
48 kids.
Yeah, and then there was a small chunk that had not identified. And so, and I wanted to check again and ask, but if you're asking them, which is all the board said was, what do we want to offer them? They can go back to their home schools. That was a very unpopular option. Okay, so that was very unpopular. And so between going back to your home school and going with IDEA, they are choosing IDEA. If you're saying I can give them another option, right, then if I know that and I can go talk to people with a real option and then ask them would they stay for that option, I think, you might get different numbers.
Okay, and so maybe it would make sense potentially economically to spend the 3.5 up front.
Yeah, and then, because then you're keeping your kids and you're not losing them forever, and what that, that aggregated loss will be. And it was topping, I can't remember the bottom line number, 60. Yeah, that's where our heartburn was. Or 48.
But that's assuming.
Good evening. So we've done some preliminary estimates, and obviously it's all sort of predicated on what the state ultimately approves in August in terms of the funding that we receive as a state through their funding formulas. But in looking at the 398 kids that have tentatively decided that they're going to move to IDEA and Allen, it results in sort of anywhere from $2.7 to $3 million revenue loss to the district. When we look at the 48 that have confirmed, you're probably looking at just under $750,000 in terms of revenue generated associated with those 48 kids under the state's funding formula. So the $4 million that it costs to probably operate a full complement of programming, working with the CAO, we may be able to bring that down to maybe closer to around the $3 million range. You're still sort of upside down. You won't break even from operating a full program in comparison to the revenue that it'll bring in. And you have to remember about 1.5 million is associated fixed costs, mandates. You have to have a principal, you have to have counselors, you have to have a food service staff, so there are various sort of expenditures that happen regardless of what the sort of per pupil driven numbers. And then obviously we have to staff for teaching and associated resources depending upon whether or not the kids get specialized services.
But but then if we project, I mean, for every year we lose those kids, that number grows. So if we can keep those kids for more than the 1 year by keeping a school open, then it might be worth the investment.
I would have to look at that in the out years, but unless we actually rebuild the program back to the point where it sort of starts to break even, it's hard to see even an out year just keeping the 48 kids where it would be a worthwhile investment where you'd sort of see it start to break even. And we'd have to it's all sort of driven by the enrollment projections in the out years. And so who can say who would come back to the programming in the out years just because we maintained it? I mean, we may, it really just depends.
Just a quick one.
Do you have a break-even number?
Not with me tonight. I didn't come prepared for the break, but I can certainly provide one.
Thanks.
Mr. Schneider and then Ms. Moya.
Works. Dr. Christopherson, I'm at a place where I'd like to see this used for something that the district does, whether we can come up with a school to put in there that's going to be something close to cost neutral for us, which sounds extremely unlikely, but that would be a preference. Other than that, some kind of operating support for whatever. I mean, move people there where we might be saving a cost or a lease somewhere else, that kind of thing. Those are the kinds of district uses I'm interested in, where we could quickly terminate if we need to and move to something else. But I'm really more curious about the timeline for the facility master plan discussion and how this would fall into a decision on this facility or other facilities would fall into the decision-making process for this specific school. I know that we committed to having a facility master plan at least agreed upon by the next summer, not this summer, but next summer. But I'm really more curious in terms of what your thoughts are on the implementation of that and how it would impact this particular facility.
Well, I mean, it depends on what the board, gives us direction on for the guiding principles for the plan and what you like to see in the plan. We have, and I don't want to digress in the plan, but we have lots of, basic bone structures of the things that we have to address in general. But for this, if you wanted to be part of that plan discussion, it's, I would say then you're not talking about it really in the scope of everything else until the spring. I mean, we won't have the principles for the plan until June, and we don't come back until August, September, and we're focused on the spend plan for the bond first. So I don't think you'll be talking about it to the spring, and I think that's just too late if you're planning for something for 14, 15. So, the two, strongest alternatives you have, I think is, if the board wants me to go back and talk to the school community, then we set that up and we go, and some trustees go with me. They did ask for trustees. They would like to have trustees come and talk to them too about what we might be able to do, and to be clear with ourselves about how much we could really afford, and whether or not it's more of a loss to try to run something that's incredibly under-enrolled. I mean, a 45-student school is a very inefficient design. You still have an element in the Eastside Memorial conversation about the feeder piece. So you might want to be considering that as well. And then, and I think that'll also depend on guidance from the commissioner and whether or not he'll give us time or something on that. And then I think your third area for serious consideration, since Proposition 2 did not pass, is looking at a strategy that could utilize that building for over-enrolled schools, overcrowded schools, because that's an immediate problem that is going to need a significant fix. And having gone through the Barrington over-enrollment and some of our other sites, especially North Central, you don't know from one year to the next how housing patterns might be incredibly, dramatic or more intense. And you have a very significant problem that you're trying to fix in a really quick way. And it just is really hard on our families. And then to your fourth piece, which is what Mr. Schneider said, is that you take the time to perhaps finish the entire facility master plan, utilize that site for a couple of years for things like that are listed there, system-wide testing, services department, that kind of thing, until you really figure out what you want to do, and then make a plan for how you bring it back as a school. So I think you just I think those four big buckets are really, your most significant options if you don't want to, close it completely.
Well, I personally would be very interested in the part of the conversation that, gives us guidance on how we're going to use this facility in accordance with the facility master plan. And I realize that, that's a ways down the road. But the thing I'm most interested in is not spending more money that would have to come out of our fund balance at this point to do so. Given the results of the election on Saturday, I'm extremely concerned about our ability to go forward in terms of moving things on our budget district-wide, whether it's M&O or how we're going to deal with some of the bond issues. So, I mean, one of my chief concerns is going to be not do anything that's going to take more money out of fund balance. And, if we can find a way to use it, not negatively impact that, that's a great solution as far as I'm concerned. But I do really think that, we need to be looking that way. The one thing that I would say that we might want to keep an eye on is the CTE part of this, particularly with regard to the legislative issues that are going to be resolved hopefully soon. So, I mean, we might want to be looking at that for as a possible use, but
That's the 3E one?
3E, yeah. Given the uncertainty of where that stands in the legislature at the moment and what their ask will be of various districts, it would seem to me that we might have a resource here to address some of the potential things that will be coming down that path.
Lori, and then Mr. Dr. Mathias.
Just real quickly, and again, to Miss Ellen's comment about the dyslexia program, I think that I realized you said for that particular geographic region area part of town, but I think that it could probably, I would be surprised that there would be that many students in one attendance area to fill a school. So I would hope that there's, hope not. So it could be a facility that could provide services district-wide, perhaps. I don't know. The other thing is, and I believe you mentioned it, Dr. Karstafen, if we kept the school as an elementary school or a K through 8 for next year, because of those students who were attending Idea Allen, the program would have to be completely different. It could not be a traditional program like we have now, what they left from their home schools. It would have to be something completely different that would interest those families into staying, because that's what caused them to leave the homeschool in the first place, was to go to another option that they believed was going to give their kids, an additional leg up or a leg up to improve their academic success. So whatever it is we decide to do there, it has to be completely different from a traditional program. Otherwise, I can't see how those families would choose to go there versus going back to their home schools or not going to IDEA. It just has to be something different. And that was all.
And just to that, what was clear is they really still wanted college-bound, college-ready, college-bound at the early grades, and we're very interested in ensuring that their students would be fluent in English, that they would learn to speak English.
Dr. Mathias.
I simply want to express my support. Vice President Hinojosa suggested that we take our time to replicate the process of community engagement that we did for the RFP process for Eastside Memorial. It seems that is vital, that rather than rush to make a decision ourselves, that we take the necessary time to engage the community to see what it is that the community has in mind for that school itself. The demographic report that we received in January was sobering with respect to East Austin schools. And so just knowing how many students we bused from the Linder attendance zone to Brook Elementary, which is maybe 4 or 5 blocks away from Allen, is something that we really need to be cognizant of. So the thought of incorporating any plan that we have into a master facilities plan, I think, is well said. And in light of our desire to strengthen the feeder schools of Eastside Memorial High School, it just seems that this presents itself as an opportunity. How can we use this facility, engage the community, and come up with a solution together for how to strengthen Eastside Memorial High School and the schools of that feeder pattern through the use of this facility? Thank you.
Ask a question. So on those comments you made, so I just need to understand how does the board internalize that? Does that mean then, I believe we're not going to be able to do that engagement before the end of the school year, which means you will not have kids being able to enroll and go to the school. So when I hear something like that, what goes in my brain for walking out this meeting and getting some work done, for example, is that we would not be opening the school next year as a school still, and that our focus is on the engagement piece for consideration in 14-15, and then that I know I can take some things off the table then, and so then does that mean you want to do anything with that building for 13-14? And just reacting to that piece of what you just said, so that we can do all the things that you said and not rush.
Okay, some of us haven't had an opportunity to speak, so let's,
My question actually would fit right with that. I'm trying to understand sorry. 3A is not operating a school program. We would reduce expenditures by 3.5 million. The options on page 3 of using the space for administrative staff, those kinds of things, are those cost avoidances on top of that 3.5 million, or is it the actual operating of the building?
So it's, in part, it's a yes, and then what we would have to do is, it was the moving, and then the, we'd still have to cover, because we still are gonna probably having that little baby wing over there, library media center stuff, but you could, cut off the rest of the building if you had to, but we'd still spend on electricity, air, some things like that, but you're not running all those things that Ms. Conley talked about, a school, like what it costs to run a school. So it wouldn't be a absolute on top of, but some of it would be. So it would be more, reduce more of our budgeted expenditures.
Further.
Yeah, I don't want to call it savings, because it's,
I know.
it's like, I was trying to find the other word. It's not savings. It's nothing that gets saved. It's just
It's a
less
reduction
debt.
Reduction on top of that
Yes.
3.5. Okay, thanks.
okay, we're about out of time. I just want to perhaps synthesize what I've heard and add one comment to what has been said. I too would like to see us slow down and take the opportunity to have a fully engaged community and fully organized community engagement process, perhaps once again organized by Alan Weeks and Austin Voices, to help us hear what the community would like to see at this school, and also to hopefully end up with what some of us, when we went to the GSDM folks, what I call the neighborhood grocery store model. In other words, a school that everybody wants to go to because it's their school and that it attracts them, while at the same time perhaps providing something unique that the community embraces because it is something they feel that they want. And in terms of the timeline, that would be for the 2014 school year, because realistically, if we are going to have any kind of a model, hiring teachers is a cycle that you get on that really starts next spring. And so you have to spend the fall identifying what you're going to do and then hiring staff in the spring. Because once again, if you really want a well thought out model, it's going to take you a little bit of time, and I don't think we can achieve that by September. So I would once again propose that what we consider is a two-part model, one that would take us through this community engagement process that I think many of us are very supportive of and feel like it's the right thing to do, and then come back and say, okay, is there one of these other options, to answer your question, Dr. Starpin, that would fill the need for 1 year? In other words, something that we know it's only going to be 1 year, so that we retain or get back to having a school at that facility within a year's time frame.
So of these options, I mean, back to what, Trustee Nahosa was saying, We don't really, to get into the building to do 2A, B, or C
Right.
means, triggers in November and then again in April. I think it's the April date. But the point is, I don't think we would have savings because by the time we got in there
Yeah,
and pay for all that, we have to get out. So the only one that you're back at 3A.
Right, that's correct. And I'm just trying to answer your question, that
Okay.
by default, I think that's what we're looking at. But to me, the more important thing is that we have a process that, that the community has helped us define a solution for the school, and that we take the time to do it right, so that we end up with something that we're all proud of, and that we have met the needs of the community, so.
Yeah, and just for that conversation, I want to just still remind us of the over-enrolled schools.
Right.
As a significant part of that conversation.
Right.
And then working it into, as quickly as possible, the facility master planning.
But with having extra capacity there, and if we develop a model that is attractive, there may be folks that would want to go there based on schools in their neighborhood or other conditions that they have at their schools. And I guess the last thing, to answer your question, I certainly am available to attend the meetings you mentioned.
Okay.
I'd be happy to participate in those
Okay.
if desired.
Okay. And then you said there was a two-part model, engagement and,
Well,
Or
it's
was it
just the
just the
fact
other
that the first year is not really part of the engagement process, and we're not trying to develop a solution for that first year. That's really only if there's something that would work. I'm not, from what you presented and just give my limited thought process, I don't see another option that would, provide us some.
so we do
Yeah, so
3A and then trigger an engagement strategy to work on planning in time for school year 14-15, but also within the facility master plan.
Yes. Yes.
Can I just add to that a consideration?
Sure.
If if the TEA commissioner approves Johns Hopkins as our partner for Eastside Memorial, I think it's important that they be engaged in that strategy for coming up with a plan as well, that they be one of the entities consulted and that comes to these community engagement meetings as well. Because I think, just like you mentioned,
Just to be sure I'm clear on the direction, if they are going to be responsible for part of the, anything with the feeder, we probably need to negotiate that in the contract and make sure that that's an expectation that they understand they are expected to work on.
I
Or
don't
no?
know if I can, yes, but I think that, I don't know if I can reference what I've seen in executive session.
Oh, no. No. No.
I think it's
We can-
covered is what I'll just say.
Oh, okay. You think it's covered? Okay, well, just point it out to me, so.
Okay. Staff, thank you very much for your time tonight. We greatly appreciate it. We are now ready to move on to the next item, and that is our discussion on school bus advertising.
Is it 7:45? It's 8:48.
Okay, Dr. Sharpen.
I thought we were ahead. You said we were on time. Mr. President, trustees of the board, on April 22nd, there was a consent agenda item to award a contract for school bus advertising. That item was pulled, so there was a request by trustee Matthias to be brought up to speed with more background and giving us some specific information to include in the agenda item, which I'll summarize. But we, back in March of 2011, as part of the district's effort with our school community, we did a huge budget reduction strategy, and the community came up with many, many, many ideas, to help us reduce any options that would further remove or reduce staff as a reduction option. So people came up with some pretty creative things. Trustee Mathot? Okay, we're here. Okay, so can we just move on then? Okay, so anyway, we did it, if you can hear me, to bring additional revenue in the face of the looming state budget cuts into the district. So in an effort to bolster revenue in the district, a partner was sought to help us manage the placement of advertisements on approximately 400 buses from our school fleets. The selected partner has their own turnkey program under which it solicits advertisers. They pay all the production and installation expenses, bill and collect from advertisers, and remit a share of the revenue to the district. And so we were starting with a starting point just to test it and see how things were going. We were going to start with around 10% of our buses, and that would bring in, we expect, a little more like a $40,000 revenue in the district. But by the 5th year of the program, we would be moving toward more like 80% of our buses, which would be any upwards of $400,000 for the district each year. But we're prepared to answer any questions. We provided for you. We enhanced this agenda item to give you more detailed background on what happened in the budget situation in 11-12. Then we talked you through. You asked us to see more about the money. I think Trustee Tice, you asked us to clear up a small thing about. I can't remember, but you asked a question that night. It's going to come to me, but we did fix it in the agenda item. I think it was something like mixed results. I think that was the language. So we summarized what some of the results are. And so we gave you those, that we attached those agenda items, the old ones. If you can look on page 12 of the agenda. Y'all have, are you on page 12? Thank you. So on page 12, Trustee Mathias, this takes you back to April 2011. Then if you look at August 22nd, 2011, that's the other agenda item where we talked about the policy itself. And then we have another on 17, that is our Exhibit A. That's another policy that's related to this. C and B local for our transportation management is another policy. And then on page 19, we have pictures for you of examples as attachment 4 of what some of the advertising would look like. And so page 20 is another example. 21, vitamins, body, brain, college fairs, health, safety, that kind of thing. But so you have a complete package that answers all the questions that were raised. And then, so we'll just turn over to trustees who have questions. And we just ask the board how they want us to handle this. Do you want it back on a consent agenda item? Or are we, can I stop working on school bus advertising and we move on to other stuff?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Karstarf, and staff. I appreciate your indulging us on this. This is an item that, as we got to the dais, it was pretty clear that this was an item that, particularly for some of the new trustees and even some of the previous trustees, that the information about how we got to where we were needed to be revisited. And so the purpose of tonight is simply to give everyone an opportunity to go back and just remember what we did over the past 2 years, how did we get here, and for everyone to have an opportunity to ask any questions. Let me also once again share that from the perspective of a time when we were really strapped for finding money, the community helped us in suggesting things, particularly because bus transportation costs for some of our routes are quite costly. And in order to find a compromise between some schools where we have fairly long routes and a way to perhaps offset some of the costs associated with them. This was an option that was proposed to the board, and the board at that time felt it was something definitely worth pursuing. So we find ourselves tonight, I will open it up for any questions or dialogue that trustees may have. Dr. Mathias.
Would want to first express my appreciation to the community members who helped to wrap their minds around the issue. As I understand it, at that time we were facing a $94.4 million budget shortfall, and so it was an all-hands-on-deck attempt to see how it is that we can be creative in meeting our fiduciary responsibilities as a school district. It seems wise that we continue to have this conversation in light of what our superintendent referred to earlier this evening as a $42 million budget shortfall. So it seems wise that we have this conversation. It seems that the 4 points that I would raise, however, are simply these. One, as part of the board materials, we saw that law enforcement officials are now required to report any advertising that is on school buses as a result of in school buses that are in accidents. And so my first question or concern that I raised with the superintendent since our last meeting was one of safety. That is to say, is there any evidence that advertisements on buses decrease safety? If it is required now that advertising be reported, do we have any data on what that's been like? So we're happy to have that concern addressed. Shall I go through all 4 concerns, or shall we pause? Okay. Second concern is simply a question for us as trustees. That is, my perspective is that our children are bombarded by a great amount of advertising. The question is, do we want to go that extra step of putting advertising on our school buses? That is to say, I simply raise the question, are there any sacred places left where there is no advertising? And I'm seeing people saying how naive I am for even thinking that, right? Third concern I would raise is simply the content of the advertising. I appreciate the photos that were included in our board packet for vitamins and things that deal with health. In my own Google search, so after raising the question at our board meeting, I went home that evening and Googled school bus advertisements and was intrigued by some of the advertisements I saw, and they were not for vitamins or health products.
We won't be doing those.
So
I saw some of those too. We won't be doing some of the creepy ones.
therein would lie the question for us in terms of policy. That is to say, where does one draw the line? Is a pizza company something that we would want to promote, for instance? Or with the targeting of students in minority communities by certain military branches, is that something that is or is not acceptable? It just seems that there are larger conversations with respect to content. Fourth concern would simply be that of funding. So the concern that I raised at our board meeting was simply that if we're talking about a $42 million budget shortfall, $42 million, then the $42,000 that we would be making the first year would be 1/10 of 1% of the shortfall that we're looking at. So I appreciate all endeavors of creativity, but it just seems that our focus should be more on the 99.9% than this 1/10 of 1% that would be met by this during its first year of funding. And so my question would be, if we are able to meet 99.9% of our budget shortfall, could we not be capable of meeting 100% of the budget shortfall? I rest.
Any other questions or comments? Well, you can,
I mean, we can,
or
yeah, we can, just the highlights are safety. I mean, the second one is a philosophical decision for the board. You've had a policy conversation, you write the policy, we go do the policy. So if the board's philosophical to your second piece about how much advertising exposure we want to add to the world for children, if the board doesn't want to do it, then you just got to tell us that that's a philosophical position that you've changed and you don't want to expose kids to advertising. So that's more of a board that one's for the board. Where do we draw the line on content? And I know we haven't answered that, Nicole. I think it's all about we've talked about this. This is more about the criteria that we set, that we have a process. We, give guidelines. We are able to verify what those things are and make decisions about things that will enhance our students. If there's any exposure, it's an enhancing exposure. It's not something that would work against the values of the board or the district. And that's in the, what do you call that document? The RFP
Right,
process.
and we
Thank
control
you.
the rights to all advertisements, so we would have the final say
Right.
in what goes onto the buses.
And then, Chris, will you be able to talk about safety?
Sure.
Yeah, and then your last one about the budget, and then I'll let Chris focus on safety. The budget question, I mean, we've gone through this. For those of you who were here, Barksdale, Schneider, multiple times in your experience. Torres, Moya, and Miss Bradley, it sounds like it's easy to find that tiny percent that you mentioned, but $43,000 is a teacher's salary. And when it starts coming down to it and you are looking for, $43,000 times 10, and then, it just keeps going, every dollar counts. So for us, it's an effort to try to, I agree, it's not the permanent solution. We're spending down fund balance for our solution going into next year. So we know we have to have bigger strategies and more things that we have to do to have a comprehensive strategy for our board and our community. But people will ask again because they gave us a list and we've been ticking it off since that last reduction thing. We've been working on all those things, and this is one of them. And so when we go back and have to talk about potential budget reductions for $42 million, they are going to ask, did you do the stuff we told you was low-hanging fruit the first time? And I'd like to be able to say yes.
Especially if we contemplate a potential tax ratification election, not anywhere in the future. They're going to ask if we did our due diligence on maximizing the revenue that we have available to us based upon those community feedback. And I'd also want to add that this was we looked at advertising in general. We looked at it for sponsorship, scoreboards, and school bus advertising was our first launch out as it relates to potential revenue options. And so we thought that since it's a more structured program and other school districts are already participating, this would be a good venture for us to see whether or not it is something that we wanted to expand or continue in hopes of broadening the revenue base as it relates to potential advertisements in the district, just to add some additional context.
Oh, safety.
This whole process of school bus advertising for me started back in 2008, and it's been a research, really since then. I've talked to many, school districts that they've been doing this. I have not talked to a director that has added additional safety issue for them. And it's not like we have our transit buses in town that they do a wraparound advertising. There is set guidelines, what you do, what you don't do. And it's only on the rear side panels. And I talked to the DPS school bus transportation about this. And yes, that is true, that every district that has an accident with the school bus, they gotta report it. For the past 3 years, they had 3 reports of that. It is required for them to do. It is not enforceable because they don't know who is involved with the accident with school bus advertising. So the only thing to measure for us, this is a 3-year pilot for us. And the only way to measure it for the safety aspect, you can see your numbers this year versus next year when we have it on our buses. Of course, if your number of accidents increase, then there may be a safety issue. So that's why we want to do a 3-year pilot, and we see what the revenue does for us and also the safety aspect of it. And that's where it stands with the safety. I have not had, again, any district that come out and say it's an issue for us. It has been nothing but positive, especially our neighbor Ames ISD. It's been positive.
If I could add some context to the numbers, so 3 accidents over 3 years, and last year in 11-12, there was a 2,358 reported accidents across all districts across the state. So over 3 years, you're talking about possibly 6,900 accidents, and to have 3 occur over those
Okay, but
3
not with
years.
bus advertising.
No, we're just
Okay.
saying accidents to give you context. You're talking about 6,900 accidents across the state over 3 years. 3 accidents over 3 years. So you're literally talking about less than 1/4% that would be directly denoted as a result of distractions, not necessarily advertisements. So there is no real conclusive evidence that suggests that safety could be an issue. I know that the association has suggested that there be standards and parameters around the placements of the ads to concern in addressing the concerns of safety, which is something that we expect to comply with and work with our vendors on making sure that the placement is appropriate on our buses. But in terms of our review, and then looking at the districts that actually have school bus advertising, when we look at the number of accidents they report, again, we're talking under, none of them even approach 1/4 percentage points in terms of directly increasing of accidents probabilities within their districts as a result of some of the advertising. So we just don't see that there's a huge correlation between advertising and safety that we could find conclusively.
Ms. Moya, and then Mr. Snyder, then Ms. Barksdale.
Dr. Matthias, you raised the question about this reporting of accidents that school buses are in. Do city transportation companies have to report as well? I mean, do police have to report on them as well? Or is this just a thing that happens with school districts?
It's with the school buses.
Only school buses?
Yes, the school bus transportations, we are required to report these every year, the number of buses that we have advertising on them.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, the number of accidents you may have with the school bus advertising on them.
Right, I understand that. I was just surprised because it sounds like other transportation companies that run buses, like cities or colleges and universities that have advertising, don't seem to have to comply with the same reporting. Is that, am I understanding correctly?
That is correct. For us, it's just from the DPS, the school bus transportation, it's just the school buses. For the safety aspect, they want to keep track of what's going on with the school buses.
I see. So it doesn't matter if a City of Austin bus that has wraparound, advertising on it is involved in an accident, and that perhaps was a distraction, but it doesn't matter enough to report it? It's not important enough to report, I guess is what I'm gathering.
I don't know about that.
Okay,
how do
that's
they do
fair.
it? But
That's fair. So I guess my point is, here's one more thing that applies only to school districts. It doesn't apply to anybody else. That's from so much for my editorial comments. My concern about the school bus advertising in relation to whether it be a philosophy of the board or a philosophical opinion of the board or whatever it is that I would hate for us to get in the business of endorsing particular businesses or particular product. So because this is public money, and I'm not talking about Cap Metro or anybody else, but for me personally, it goes against my grain that we would endorse a pizza restaurant over another pizza restaurant, or something like that. It would seem that if we went down this avenue, that we would want to look for advertising that enhances our academic, programming somehow, or, everybody needs to read or something like that, as opposed to, again, a pizza restaurant, a soft drink company, I don't know, a convenience store chain, whatever it is. And I don't know if that reduces our opportunities for vendors, and how significantly that would reduce our pool of vendors that would be interested in doing advertising. But I want to go on record that my philosophical opinion is that it be something that enhances the educational product that we have, rather than endorsing individual businesses.
Dr. Sarver.
Yes, trustees of the board, trustee Moya. So that's, one of the things that we can take in consideration when we're doing our RFPs and looking for, bless you, different providers. But I just wanted to direct your attention to one of them on page 19 at the top. We thought this one was kind of cool, and that's why we put it in there. It's Cypress Fairbanks, but basically they use their own buses to advertise for positions that you would probably otherwise have to pay advertising for out of your own budget to get bus drivers. And so, part of what we were, thinking about, and of course we haven't done this yet, so we're still looking. We were thinking about was kind of similar to what you were saying. You said it one way, and it opens up some other windows and doors in my mind. And this way, we were thinking, well, goodness, this is a way for us to do, I guess, to kind of get more toward a cost neutral on where we might have spent money on advertising ourselves. And then, on, well, this is not our partner. If you look on page 20 at the top, we do have, some partners that the board has already, and I guess this is a partner. It looks like a healthcare medical center thing. My picture is kind of bad. But if you look at that, I mean, that was one where, I thought, there's another universe of people that we already have vetted are our partners, are people that work with us, that we know are safe and help our families. And they may, we can target some of our interest in getting some of those people, within the limits of ensuring we're good with, bids and things of that sort. Not bids, I keep saying, yes, the RFP for this project. And so, yeah, but, I understand, we kind of selected ones that, we thought like college fairs, really focusing on people that we know spend money but are doing the same end goal of what we value and represent. So college, college readiness and those kinds of things open up a lot of doors as well. So, and then some of them I could see where a racket club, might, be one person over another. It's not pizza, but it's the similar concept. So we can take all that back and really, continue to shape it and try to, find our right niche for what we think is appropriate for our advertising.
No, I appreciate that, and I don't know, what kind of brainstorming you guys are going to do as you move forward, but one of the things that came to my mind was PTA and PTSA. We're constantly trying to improve our membership, on our campuses. So why not have that on a couple of buses that are cruising around
For
town?
a price?
If state PTA can afford it, I don't see why not. If it's legal, I don't know if it is or not, but if it's legal, we can always ask. What's the worst that could happen? They could say no, we're not out anything.
Mr. Schneider.
Okay. Sorry. Ms. Moya, I completely agree with you on the control that we ought to have over the content of the ads, but I think that's something we can do through policy or making very clear to them in direction. I mean, I've seen these in Dallas, I've seen them in Waco, San Antonio, here in town, and I have absolutely no problem at all with moving forward with this. And the point about the distinction between what we do with our buses and Cap Metro, I mean, to me, it's nearly silly to think that because we don't advertise on our buses, then therefore that creates, a really safe environment, but Cap Metro is allowed to do the same thing, and they're the ones that are causing all the trouble. I mean, it just, it doesn't make sense. But I won't go any further into that. I've already caused enough trouble here. So, I mean, I would very much like to see this go forward as soon as possible. And, I mean, I do think the policy committee and the board needs to do some work on how we control the content. It's only a 3-year project. I mean, you know, Chris may find that we put ads on their buses and we have, you know, 1,000 accidents are attributed to us in the first year. I mean, you know, I don't know. But, you know, I would personally like to see this move forward as soon as possible.
So is that?
Thank you.
Are we go, should we?
We've got other people that need to
Oh.
talk. Mr. Barksdale.
Do we know how much our neighboring district made from this? Eanes, you say Eanes is doing this?
Yes, ma'am.
Do we know how much they made, like in their year 1, 2, or?
In Eanes, it's the second year right now.
Okay.
They have it on 50 buses, 40 or 50 buses, and they make close to 60,000.
And for our district, would this be a whole outsourcing of, are there any district resources required to make this happen? I don't remember from our previous.
I'm just trying to imagining like parents making posters.
Glitter and glue, glitter and glue. And tape.
No, we definitely outsourcing.
No, I mean, the administration of it
Yeah,
completely.
we're not going to manage that at all.
Okay. And to the point about content, I happen to work in an industry where we only do advertising for what we call the white hat clients of the world. So imagine advertising for the American Heart Association, for litter abatement, water conservation, tobacco prevention. There's plenty of people who would pay for space on a school bus that have nothing to do with selling more stuff to kids or selling more stuff to people at all. So the market is certainly out there, but definitely.
What are they called again?
White hat.
White hat, social marketers.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Right, and between nonprofits, NGOs, city, state, federal, there are clients we could have that would certainly be in line with our values as a district, but definitely a philosophical question to answer that Trustee Mathias raised on when is enough in terms of advertising, but we could certainly find people in line with us, and public television and radio do a really good job of setting standards, and we could just copy those.
Okay. Well, I'll just, to answer your question, I think this is worth bringing to the next consent opportunity. I too support this. I think this is something that, quite frankly, will help take care of some of the costs of perhaps losing a teacher. I think it's unfortunate, Dr. Mathias, that you look at it from the perspective of the large amount, because we need to look at every small amount to add up to large amounts. And the other aspect of it is, if we wanted to bring in the same amount of money, it's going to cost us $82 more for every 100 that we try to bring in, because we have to give back that much to the state. So it's really more than just the amount. We need to think about how much we'd actually have to get in taxes to do that. And I agree with my colleagues in terms of the content. I think there are ways to deal with this, and we just need to be prudent about that. And impose that on our staff to make sure that they carry out the will of the board. So I'm very much in support of this, and look forward to bringing it forward at the next opportunity.
We'll do that May 20th.
Mr. President, quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
Am I hearing consensus from the board that the policy committee needs to start working on gathering information and at least having some conversations about what our policies could look like and to bring to the board?
Sorry, were you gonna say?
Just a clarifying question, you mean policies for this?
For limiting the type of advertising, I think is what she's asking about. And I think the answer is yes.
Oh. Or you could do it as administrative procedure, which is that's what we were doing. And we can share that with y'all if you're interested in seeing it, but we just kind of.
Regulation.
But you work with the administration on regulation coordination as well, right?
Well, we can direct them at the request of the board to develop a regulation that includes these things.
Right.
So we can do that.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So do the
Put that on our list.
On the regulation.
Work with
Thank
the
you.
policy committee on the appropriate mechanism, yes.
Whether it be a policy or a regulation.
Exactly. Okay, staff, thank you very much for coming forward. Appreciate your support on this, and we look forward to if it passes, a report at the end of either 3 years or maybe annually. Okay, I believe that concludes our items. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. Second by Ms. Ellens. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Motion passes unanimously by all the members on the dais. Thank you, folks.